Hello and welcome to Contramundum. I am Andrew Isker, and with me, as always, is the star of the show, CJay Engel, and he's definitely the star of the show today because we are going to discuss his brilliant article for American Reformer on Middle American radicals.
Yes.
And this might be a concept that people are not familiar with, and so we're going to elucidate that here today. So, what is a Middle American radical, CJay?
I have to look it up because I wanted to bring up the article. I have no clue, man.
Well, here
You're asking the wrong guy. You're asking the wrong guy.
yeah, right. Well, I boomer posted it. I printed it out, like a boomer.
Nice.
And so it's a concept from the
Well, yeah,
sociologist Donald Warren. Like, tell me
I'll
about that.
I'll
Yeah,
explain it. But beforehand,
yeah.
I wanted to say too, um, Barron Trump has entered the political domain. Did you
Oh
see
yeah,
that?
we have to get that out of the way. Yeah, he's
Yes. So the
Caesar is
moment,
upon us.
yeah, it's just it's funny because everyone's like, no, he's autistic, he's not even into politics and stuff, but I guess he's actually like really into it like he thinks about it and talks about it with people, and the right wing was right that he is his father's avenger. So
Yes, yes.
yeah.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to some of you on the left coast, like CJay. But yeah, let's look. I'm just checking in the chat already. Lots of comments. Rusty asks if Toby should be in the NGMI poll. I don't know. I don't think so. Don't do that. Toby's a good guy. He just, we disagree on some things.
Yeah,
But
let me get back to your question though. So what is a middle American radical? So a middle American radical was it was a phrase that was coined by Donald Warren in his book The Radical Center. I really like that phrase. I should use it more. But basically, he was describing this phenomenon, and this phenomenon comes directly from the managerial revolution. The managerial revolution was this progressive era moment in American history in which the power elite, the people that were in charge of, basically capital, the means of production and all that, they had a very crony, corrupt, and cozy relationship with the federal government.
whoa! You sound like a Marxist. Are,
Yeah,
are we are we with the woke right here? CJ?
we're gonna get into the woke right stuff for sure today. But yeah, this is like one of the best aspects of like libertarian 20th century history is they actually do a really good job on this. The truth about the
Yeah,
progressive era is that it was funded and led by big business,
yeah. That
by
the like.
cozy relationship with financiers
Let me
and
find it. Murray
bureaucracies.
Rothbard's.
Yeah, they had this relationship, and like, what's that phrase? Ayn Rand. She's like the most persecuted like minority in America is big business. Like that was her thing. And Murray Rothbard, like in his cackling New York accent, that's a complete joke. But he like so this idea that America, the power elite on the left is basically this like oppressed, proletariat type is just completely false. The 20th century is the product of managerialism. And so
Yeah, I
this
just put it
idea
in the chat. The Murray Rothbard end of laissez-faire to World War II,
yeah,
or
his
1870 World War
stuff
II.
on this is like is the best. It's the best.
Required listening. If you listen to you pause it right now, open that up, listen to all like 20 hours of the podcast, and Murray talking like the whole time,
Yeah.
and you will understand American history and the managerial revolution, and all of it at a
Yeah.
very high level. But sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, and then that was the New Deal era, right? So that's
Yeah.
when like the federal government really got involved with things. And then after World War II, we had the Great Society, right? That was LBJ's thing.
Hmm.
And that was this like extension of all of the instincts and tendencies of the New Deal. Basically were doubled down and institutionalized during the post-war era. And that's kind of what led to Donald Warren's thesis is there was this
Hmm.
like phenomenon in America with we already had Social Security, but then we have like Medicare and Medicaid, like all of these various other not I wouldn't call them socialist actually. I would just call them like very interventionist, like basically liberal managerialism. And it came about in the 1960s and 70s and 80s. And basically he's describing this phenomenon where the power elite would benefit from accumulating more power for themselves and giving it to, giving handouts to the poor, and so
Hmm.
there was this dynamic in American politics where the elite, the very wealthy, and the poor were benefiting from the new political structure. And the people in the middle felt like they were left out.
Yeah.
And so this is what, and they were frustrated by this, and they would appeal to people like, George Wallace and others who basically were dissenting not only from the managerial revolution and the Great Society, but also the new civil rights movement, because the
Yeah.
entire ethos of the civil rights movement was that there were people on the cultural outside who were being benefited that needed to be, catered to politically, and the only people that were left out were heritage Americans, people that whose parents and grandparents had been here for decades, centuries,
Mhm.
and they were the ones that were not getting any special favors. And so they began to radicalize, and that's what the radical center means.
This comment, I mean, I think we can get to this in a little bit, but this plays into everything you're saying right now. So, Mary says, "I'd love to hear if you know much about the view that when Marxists say whiteness, they actually mean capitalism and they define it as private property ownership." Um,
Ownership.
yeah. So, oh, we lost CJ. There's no phone. Now I can say whatever I want.
Can
Okay, go ahead.
you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah,
I don't
you
know what
cut out
happened.
there. Yeah, they
Yeah, they're
attack.
on to us. They
They
are on to
attack.
us. As a medical American. So let me respond to that. I think that was true of the older generation of the left, but not anymore. I think that
Yeah.
I think that the new left is much more focused literally on culture, and it's being funded by like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. I don't think they have a problem with capitalism. I don't think they're
Mhm.
interested in collective ownership of the means of production. I don't think they care about, like the Leninist dynamic of proletariat. I think it's
Yeah.
really fueled by capital. I wouldn't call it.
Yeah.
I mean, we could call it capitalist if you want. I don't really think that's a fair phrase. But the fact of the matter is that the rich and the poor are teaming up, and now we've had this transformation. And this is the great insight of Sam Francis. And I say this in my article. What happened in the 1960s and 70s was that the left became a post Marxist or a post economic left, and they became very much a cultural left. And so all these categories
Mhm.
about the center being radicalized, the center being forgotten, middle Americans being rejected, all of this stuff framed in economic terms, which was how Donald Warren phrased it, was actually just the predecessor to the culture wars.
Yeah.
And what the new middle American radicals were actually those who were on the cultural outside, and the new oppressor class, are those that are patriarchal, heteronormative, like all of these things that they use, like people who emphasize the nuclear family, they emphasize
Mhm.
Christianity, they emphasize older aesthetics and ways of like specific types of music, specific types of art and architecture. It was a cultural war, and there were
Mhm.
those on the elite who were benefiting those on the cultural margins for this revolution against the center. And I think that is a much more appropriate understanding of the dynamics of the culture war than the original economic thesis put forth by Donald Warren. And I can't think of anybody who's been more prescient on this issue than Sam Francis. It's funny because like the book that people read right now is like his big tome, the Leviathan tome, and it's like this big analysis of power dynamics and power politics. But actually, his regular op-eds from the 80s and 90s, like it's collected in this book that's really hard to find, unfortunately, called Revolution from the Middle. I think it's
Mhm.
mostly chronicles essays. But
Mhm.
he gets into this in detail, and he just talks about the fact that middle Americans, heritage Americans, are the ones that are bearing the full brunt of the left wing revolution, and this they're
Yeah.
sandwiched in a culture war between those at the cultural margins and those at the top of the cultural elite, and the heritage Americans are the ones being squeezed out. And what are the consequences of that? I talk about I talk about that dynamic, and then I talk about the failure of the conservative movement to look out for these middle American radicals, and what has to be done now that we have basically been pushed out of polite society.
Yeah, so I think like Mary's comment here, and in one sense, yeah, she's definitely right that there are still legit communists, socialists, Leninists, right? That talk about economic Marxism, and that's their main focus, the main thing they talk about, and they bleed into a lot of the leftism and leftist activism. and they still use that language, right? So they frame it around opposing capitalism, but the people funding them, right, are the people at the very top, right? So they'll talk about how horrible capitalism is and everything else, but it's it's the people that fund the NGOs and all the institutions and so forth that drive these people. So they let them have their little socialist fantasy. Like you think back to like Occupy Wall Street,
Right.
right? It's like a prime example of this, where like who was paying for that and pushing all of that? Um, the people at the very like the 1% that they're protesting against.
So yeah, I that's an interesting thing because I think the Tea Party was legit grassroots. I think the Tea Party was legitimate.
At the beginning of it, at least,
Yeah,
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 yep,
and then it got taken over by Occupy Wall Street. People don't realize that, and I think that the Occupy Wall Street was this like counter revolution against this grassroots
yeah,
frustration, and they basically the elite did that to shore up the left.
yeah.
I
And then they pushed all sorts of like left wing cultural stuff in
Mhm,
order to subvert that, right?
mhm,
I mean they direct all of this maybe genuine Marxist energy toward cultural subversion rather
right,
than anything economic, right?
right.
That's often what they do. And so yeah, they always frame it around capitalism, where capitalism is the big boogeyman. They still use that language. So Mary's right, right? That they want like she says here, you queer
But they're
Marxist.
doing that
Uh,
because
ca-
they're doing that because heritage Americans identify with capitalism. So I mean,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So what they call capitalism is not Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and all of the billionaires and so forth. They think of capitalism as Jim Bob the contractor that makes 150K a year and drives an F-250, right?
mhm,
That's what they think of as cap, not the big, even though they'll talk about the big corporations and all this kind of stuff. It's the middle Americans they hate and want to
correct,
destroy.
correct.
The ones that uphold the capitalist system, which is heteronormative and has nuclear families and is largely white people,
Mhm,
right? It's kind of this shell game and really this like Mott and Bailey that they play. Like they use the traditional leftist Marxist language, but it really isn't that, right? I mean, just look at some of the left, like what's the guy that Sam Hyde wanted to fight? The streamer, Hassan Piker, right? Like this guy, and he's just a newer iteration of like the limousine leftists, right? And they don't actually care about capitalism. I mean, they say it, they definitely say it all the time, but it's the middle Americans that they want to
right,
destroy.
right. Yeah, you have to understand that like Pride Month and like celebrate like diversity and like all of these subversive holidays, subversive months, all of the artwork and all this stuff. It comes out of corporate America. Like it's not
Mhm.
driven by this avant-garde left who's trying
Yeah,
to capture power. It's driven by power. They've already
yeah,
won. And this is part of the point too of the article is Heritage America already lost. There's nothing left
yeah,
to conserve. All the institutions have been captured. Our ways of life have been completely subverted and turned on their heads. There's nothing left to conserve. Like so,
yeah.
I do appreciate the ethos in mentality of old conservatism, and I wish that we could practice that, but I don't
Mhm.
think it's possible anymore. And I think that Sam Francis was right that it died out in his time, not in our time.
Yeah.
It's
It's
already the revolution is behind us.
Yeah, the corpse is dead and buried, and there is no bringing it back to life, right?
Yeah.
That I mean, I even see this like you know, I got into it. I mean, not really. It wasn't too acrimonious, I don't think, but with like Redeem Zoomer and his whole plan to like retake the institutions, retake the PCUSA and things like that. And it's like, buddy, if you wanted to do that, you needed to be born in the time of J. Gresham Machen, right? Like that's it's not happening anymore. Like it's probably not. I mean, just look at the PCA. Um, right, inviting David French to come speak to their General Assembly this year. Like
Mhm.
it's probably not happening there either. But I wish all my PCA friends well in trying to shore up their denomination. But it's across the board, and so that's the point to understand. And yes, uh, Megazar, I think, is CJay, blackpilling out here. I don't think it is a black pill. I'll let you speak for yourself, but I don't think it is a black pill to like just recognize the reality of your situation. You can only it's blackpilling if you think everything is bad and there's nothing we can do. But talk about that a little.
Well, at the end of my essay, I really critique what I call the feel-good political messaging of the Republican Party. And so there's this aspect, and I always say optimism is cowardice, right? That's my thing. But what I mean by that is we can't have this, everything's great. By definition, America can't be conquered. I think
Mhm.
that is a completely cheap and useless optimism.
Yeah.
So it's not blackpilling to say that we have to rethink things and we have a more emergency like situation and we have to have an insurgent mentality in order to address the political enemies that confront, that are
Mhm.
amongst us. It's not blackpilling, but it certainly is a rejection of this, basically this optimism that has been fueled by Conservative Incorporated. Conservative
Mhm.
Incorporated has this ethos of like, what was her name? The Kimberly Guilford or whatever, the Trump lady.
Guilfoyle. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Remember when she was like, the best is yet to come? And it was like this super optimistic, awkward, like that is what I think
Mhm.
of when I think
Mhm.
of feel good optimism. There's like
Yeah.
no strategy behind it, no tactic, there's no admitting the extent to which the left captures everybody and has already
Mhm.
captured all things. You can't admit it because it's America. America can't be conquered. America can't be
Mhm.
subverted. I think that's stupid, and we need to get over that. We need to have
Yeah.
much more of a confrontational insurgent attitude because we are insurgents. We exist at the margins. We're not allowed in polite society. We'll get fired. And like if you and I had corporate jobs, we would get fired for having this
We
podcast.
we would be fired already. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're unemployable actually. Like right now, we
Mhm.
couldn't apply anywhere.
Yeah.
We exist at the margins, and I think that there are millions of people in our shoes, but they don't have the freedom to speak up. They're
Yeah.
not they're not exceptions. They're the majority.
Yeah.
Like the middle American radicals are the majority still, barely. I mean, we're losing our for because of immigration and cultural subversion, but it's the fact remains that we have a very vast base, and there are things therefore that can be done about it.
Yeah. I mean that's the thing that white pills me is as bad as 2020 was, the you saw that there are 70, almost 80 million Americans who wanted Trump to be president. And whatever they do to Trump, right? If they throw him in prison, if they fortify the next election and definitely throw him in prison over who knows what, those people still exist, right? And yes, like the boomers are dying off. That's true. But even so, right, it isn't just all boomers, right? There are young people that are part of Heritage America that have no one representing them at all, and they are longing for someone to speak to their interests. Right? That's the big point of the things Francis was saying, the things that Pat Buchanan was saying, the paleocons, all of it. They were representing actual Americans and the things that they care about, the things that were in their best interest, obviously, that no one does anything about at all.
Hmm.
Because you have the high-low coalition, you have the elites and big business and everything the so-called Marxists say they hate, but they don't actually. And the people at the very bottom who are radicalized by the elites to hate everyone in the middle.
Correct.
That that's the paradigm that we're operating in.
Yeah.
And one of the white pills is that I think people in the 80s and 90s were not ready for any of that. They didn't think in those terms at all.
Right. Because
And
I think the reason is because we won World War II. And
yeah,
so they had this undefeated attitude, like we did
yeah,
it, conquered history.
yeah, yeah. We've reached the end of it, and then we conquered the Soviet Union,
Hmm.
and so now everything is great. And the reality is, no, everything's unraveling all before you, and only a few people were prescient enough to be able to see reality when everyone else didn't want to. And now reality is unavoidable, right? You
Yeah.
see this. We've talked about, and hopefully, he's doing a lot of media appearances. You already talked to him on Chronicles, but Jeremy Carl in his book The Unprotected Class, right, that's making a lot of waves, and rightfully so. That and it's like centrally part of this overarching thesis that the people in the very center, they have no protection at all, right? The big business, everything is, and the people at the very top, everything is built around protecting their interests. The people at the very bottom, the new Constitution of the Civil Rights Act protects their interests.
Mm-hmm.
The people in the middle are the ones that are tax cattle and the ones that finance both the high and the low,
Mm-hmm.
and basically are slaves to provide for both,
Yeah.
right? They
Yeah.
labor for big business. They pay taxes to support the underclass, and they get nothing, right?
Yeah.
That's the reality.
Yeah. So and one of the things that I really appreciate about like Sam Francis is he recognized, he incorporated the insights of people like Gramsci, like Antonio Gramsci, the communist guy.
Uh-oh, now we're definitely in the woke right here, right?
Yes.
Uh-oh.
But no, but it's important because people like that, they grappled with the very idea of a cultural hegemony. I mean,
Yeah.
they dealt with it. What does it look like? What does it look like for somebody on the margins to organize, to unify, and to confront those who have all the power? So I think there's lessons to be learned there, and I think that we shouldn't be afraid to learn those lessons because as heritage Americans, we've never been on the margins before. We've never had to
Yeah.
deal with this. We are the product of over 1,000 years of European civilization. For the
Mhm.
first time in that 1,000 years, we actually now exist at the margins. So what does that look like? What lessons can be gleaned from those who have thought deeply about this issue? And Gramsci is
Mhm.
someone who did think deeply about this issue. And Sam Francis, therefore, I think with justification, relies on the insights of Gramsci and others on the left, because the left won. They did it.
Yeah.
They set out to win and to take over Western culture, and they succeeded. And therefore,
Mhm.
we know it's possible.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, well, the key difference, and you could correct me, you've read more Francis than I have. The key difference there, in my mind, is that the left is inherently parasitic and destroys everything it comes into contact with, and the right, of course, is the antithesis of that, and also that they have no trouble robbing, stealing, killing, doing it, all sorts of horrible antisocial things. Whereas people on the right do not behave that way. They're productive people. They care about order and stability. And so, how do you adopt the views of Gramsci? I call him Gramsci. You're more enlightened than me. You have Italian blood, so you can
well, Paul says Gramsci, and I believe everything.
you just do whatever Paul says.
Yeah.
Well, Doug Wilson says Gramsci, so I do whatever Doug says.
Okay.
Obviously, but the I mean, you see this also with like Saul Alinsky, right? Saul Alinsky is very much the Gramscian, inheritor,
Mhm.
and so you could actually glean a lot from reading Alinsky, reading Rules for Radicals. I
Right.
mean, especially in terms of cultural insurgency, right? It isn't like this no goes. Oh, we can't read these guys because they're bad. Well, they are bad, but they
Well,
also won.
that's the thing. So this is the dynamic. The left reads all those people.
Yeah,
The
and
conservative
Carl Schmidt,
movement, yeah,
right?
and while they do that, while the conservative movement purges people who read that.
Yeah,
Who do you think's going to win that fight?
yeah,
Like that's
exactly.
the thing. Yeah.
Exactly, and so I mean, it's probably as good a time as any to get into discussion on the woke red. I mean, I know you talked with Paul about this today, so it might be a repeat of some of these things, but it's worth it anyway. Um, yeah, you see this, and we will do, if we have time next week. We have more content than time allows, which is a great problem to have. But we'll go over Neil Shenview's review of my book,
Mhm.
hopefully next week. But I mean, that's his big takeaway from my book is that, oh, this is like the woke right. they're adopting the same strategies as the woke left, and it's horseshoe theory, and and like all this kind of stuff. And it's like, no, I don't think you get it, right?
So,
Your
yeah.
strategy is losing on purpose,
Well, the thing
right?
is, oh, I should probably see my face.
Yeah,
Okay, so
there we go.
yeah, well, I think that makes the mistake of there's this complete inability of establishment. I wouldn't call them an establishment, but just like mainstream
Yeah.
conservatives.
Hmm.
There's this inability for them to distinguish between the revolution and the counter-revolution.
Yeah.
This is an important way to think about these things. So if you can't distinguish between the revolution and the counter-revolution, you're probably operating within a liberal framework. And
Yeah.
Shenvi doesn't like the idea that, like, he doesn't like phrases like the post-war consensus and all that kind of stuff.
No.
But I really do think that that's a good way to describe the posture and framework that they operate within.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can get away with that. I mean, they talk about things in terms of absolute universal rights. They talk about the
Hmm.
Constitution and all of these as it was interpreted in the 20th century, right? They
Yes.
would know that they would never go back to the pre 19th amendment or anything like that, but it has to
No.
be the 20th century version of things, which incorporates the civil rights movement, the progressive
Hmm.
movement. They'll never talk about the fact that the New Deal, the Great Society, even World War II intervention, all of these things were completely unconstitutional. They'll never talk about any of that. But
No.
when you want to use power to address a new enemy, most recent problems, well, then it's just horseshoe theory. But I
Yeah.
think that the problem is that you have to distinguish between those who are willing to confront politically the revolution. And if you want to confront politically the revolution, by definition, you're no longer a liberal.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, some of it is, I mean, just back to Francis, it's beautiful losers, right? It's what it is. Like they would rather lose
Right.
and hold to these timeless principles, right? At least I have my principles as you're getting hauled away to the gulag,
Mhm.
right? They would rather have that than win and have order, have peace, have stability, have everything that's good and true and beautiful. We can't have that
Yeah.
if we violate liberal pieties.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
Yeah. Yep.
And so that's the thing that threatens them, that scares them. That, I mean, and you see it, like you see, and even the stuff, whether it has to do with horrible racism and anti-Semitism and all the scary things that you see online, especially among young people. It's that they're reacting to the circumstances that they're in, right? They're reacting to the things that have happened to them. Where, I mean, you look at Jeremy Carl's book, and it just outlines in a very, um, you know, very academic and dispassionate way to demonstrate young white men are this group that is completely outside the framework of the Civil Rights Act and openly discriminated against,
Yes.
overtly, right? We don't want white guys, right? Whites need not apply. White men, heterosexual white men, get out of here. We don't want you, right?
Right.
That's the thing. Like, young guys that are graduating from college right now and trying to start their lives and their careers and everything else are being told, "You're scum. We hate you. You're at the bottom of the totem pole. You're worthless." And what do you think is going to happen for an entire generation that grows up in that environment? They're going to react to that,
Yeah.
right? And they're going to consider ideas that otherwise were forbidden to them.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Exactly.
And if you have no sensitivity to that, if you have no sympathy for these people, they're not going to listen to you, anything that you have to say at all. And
Mhm.
the same thing goes with, I mean, you see, and it's like the Norm Macdonald joke about Marlon Brando,
Mhm.
being forced to apologize for saying that Hollywood is run by Jews, and it's like, and
Yeah.
after he made the apology, he's allowed to work again, right? And it's like they see the fact that Congress, which can't do anything at all, tons of gridlock, right? They're you have a Republican House, Democratic Senate, a Democratic president, and they can't pass anything, they can't make anything happen. But overwhelming bipartisan consensus on making anti-Semitism as the International Holocaust Society defines it,
Mm-hmm.
a violation of the Civil Rights Act.
Yeah.
Right? They bend over backwards to do that, and it's like, well, who has power? Right?
Yeah.
Well, the Israel lobby does. Obviously, everyone can see that.
Yeah.
Everybody can. And you're not allowed to
That's
say that or think about that. And so
that's
young people are open to these things in the ways previous generations aren't. And they feel the reality that they are part of the middle that is being squeezed by the high-low coalition.
yeah, exactly. This is one of the great points of Christopher Caldwell's book.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Age
he
of entitlement. Yeah.
Age of Entitlement. So he talks about the fact that it's built into the structure and logic of the civil rights movement, the Civil Rights Act, and its derivative cases,
Mm-hmm.
that um, the political structure is up for grabs to any group that wants to claim any like oppression or any like
Mm-hmm.
outside status. They can utilize the structure of things as it was implemented during that era, but the only group that cannot are white Americans, and he's
Yeah.
very explicit about that. And he points it out. So Christopher Caldwell is not some like dissident right,
No.
like anti-Semite. He's very much
No.
like a conservative leaning, moderate guy.
Yeah.
He's got. I think he still has an op-ed at like is it the Washington Post? No,
It might.
it's something
Probably.
like that.
Yeah, but very mainstream guy,
So
very normie con
this
think
is not
tank kind of
forcing
guy.
stuff. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is so he describes this in length, but it's true that the only people who cannot claim oppression are heritage Americans.
Yeah.
So if everyone else is allowed to use power and the structure of the civil rights movements veneer that it placed on the Managerial Revolution, well, how come everyone else can talk about the structure of things except for whites? And when we do it, we're the woke, we're right. It's like,
Yeah.
well, no, that's literally what it says. It's
Yeah.
literally what it does. And the purpose of a system is what it does. And I think if you read that book, you recognize the fact that we are the unprotected class. And I don't think how you can reach it. Even Jeremy Carl, he's a very typical conservative guy. He's
The
not some,
Claremont guy. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's not some radical guy. So these are ideas and these are observations that are not coming out of the blogosphere. They're coming out of
Mm-hmm.
people that are willing to challenge the Republican narrative as it has existed over the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's heartening that's starting to happen within more mainstream, uh,
Yeah, it's unfortunate though
environments.
that like
No.
it's unfortunate that Sam Francis never got his due. He called it
Yeah.
out 30 years ago.
Yeah. And for that, he was purged.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that was not allowed. You're not allowed to talk about those things. And today, I think some of it is just, it's so blatantly obvious
Mhm.
that you can't keep your head in the sand and pretend it's not happening anymore. In the 90s, you could, it still was happening then. Like if you think about, the Rodney King riots and the OJ trial and all of the stuff like that, right? It seemed obvious then
Mhm.
too, but now it's just so overt, so blatant. I mean, you see it all over the place that you can't pretend, oh, it's not happening, it's not real. You're just a victim, and that's part of it too. I think that is worth talking about is um it's important not to adopt this like victim mentality because that is a thing that the low part of the high low coalition preys upon is you're
Right.
victims, you're being oppressed, all these horrible things are happening to you, and then you have this sense of of helplessness. um and so
So then the
I don't
question
think the
is,
middle American radicals are ever going to adopt that frame of victimhood,
right. So
even though they genuinely are victims of this horrible system.
right. So that's what comes to the third part of my essay, which is the insurgent mentality.
Yeah.
We're not going to play the victimology game. We may be the political system may be structured against us, but I think that what our time calls for is not um, the degrading mentality of being oppressed, but rather a more of an insurgent mentality where we can conquer those who are seeking to liquidate our way of life. That's
Yeah.
the insurgent mentality, that we
Yeah.
do want to fight back and that we have the energy and the resources at our disposal to do something about it. And so that's the question,
Yeah.
what should be done? And I think that's what That's what my essay concludes with, basically.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, I've had these discussions online and talked about these things. Like I had some debate with like Toby Sumter. Going back to Rusty's question earlier in the chat. A debate about these things, and it is. I mean, even that debate, I can fill in some of the folks that maybe are not as online as everyone else, but there is this idea that the anti-white race hate that exists, that's overt, that's obvious, really it's about Christianity, and that's really all it's about. Ultimately it's about them hating the gospel, hating the truth of the Christian religion, which I don't deny. Right, they do hate that because it's true. They are liars and of their father, the devil. So they hate the truth. That's obvious. But at the same time, in on the ground, in the practical reality that we live in, they do hate whiteness. Right, it's all they talk about, whiteness, and they conflate Christianity with whiteness, of course.
Mhm.
But that doesn't right. The idea that they actually hate Christianity, that doesn't help a young guy who puts his application in at a Fortune 500 company is rejected because he's white. Right? Oh well, they hate Christianity, so I guess I'm fine. That doesn't help anything. And really, what it does is subverts any practical action to counter these
Mhm.
things at all. And so the flip, and so part of it, I think, the reticence to admit, yeah, they just hate white people,
Mhm.
right? They hate heritage Americans. They
Mhm.
hate us. Um, is a fear of any sort of like racial identity forming, of like white identity politics coming to fruition, right?
Mhm.
A fear of that happening, which in one sense, like I don't think that's ever going to happen, at least explicitly and overtly in that way. It's not like all of a sudden the middle American radicals are going to wake up one day and just decide they want to be Wignats, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever going to take shape that way at all. I think it's what it'll be formed around. It's very much like things like MAGA, right? Make America. It'll be around American identity,
Mhm.
right? As a distinct thing. Which are there aspects of race and ethnicity and things like that? There, of course, there are, but I don't think like you said, I don't think it's a like racially essentialist thing at
Right.
all, right? It's not. All right, this is only for white people and nobody else. It's like, well, no, there's lots. I mean, there's lots of people that have been here for many generations. Like one thing I think about is like in Texas, and maybe Texan friends that are in the chat can confirm or deny this, but there are Hispanics that have been there for as long as my family's been in Minnesota, and
Yeah.
they identify with America as much
Let's,
as any Anglos do,
I'm super
and
interested
they
in this
vote
topic.
Donald Trump too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. I'm super interested in this topic because I'm from California, and like
Yeah.
the actually the Spaniards settled this area,
Hmm.
you know, and
Yeah.
it was all dominated by Mexico at one time.
Yeah.
So so when I say heritage American, um, I do think that there are correlations because all of America was basically the conglomeration of the institutions and influence of the culture of European dominated societies. So
Yeah.
I think that whites were the predominant cultural ethos of America. That's what it means by heritage American. But
Hmm.
we integrated in our experience dealing with people from other cultures. And that
Hmm.
part of that mosaic was that there were minorities like Native Americans and Southern Blacks and Hispanics on the West Coast and things like that. They were all integrated in. But that doesn't mean it's a melting pot because it was dominated by European instincts, institutions, rules, norms, mores, principles, traditions, customs, ways of thinking and dressing. We dominated that thing. So the idea, so the war is not based on racial essentialism, but there is
Hmm.
a correlation there. I think that
Yeah.
people who seek have an anti-Western mentality are the destroyers in our midst, and I think that we
Yeah.
need to address those people. I also think that just because there's no racial essentialism doesn't mean there's not ethnic correlation. I think
Yeah.
that ethnic correlation is a huge part of preserving Heritage America.
Well, and that's I mean that's where it gets so sticky and thorny is anytime you talk about race and ethnicity immediately people get what Stephen Wolf calls race brain, where
Mhm.
they come at it from the ideological consensus that formed after the Second World War, and they view things like, well, you just hate minorities, you just hate anyone that's not like you, and that's not what anyone is talking about really at all, right? There is this quintessential Americanness, but it's not exclusive, right, at all. And part of it too is like you have various groups. Like my ancestors came in the 1860s and 70s, right? And have been here, since then. And there we don't. I'm not like from Mayflower stock,
Mhm.
but they integrated into American culture within 2 generations, like
Mhm.
seamlessly. And you even have, I mean, we could get into Ellis Island and things like that, and how, and the successes and failures of
You
that. I
owe me
mean,
an
we talked
apology.
about that. What's that?
You owe me an apology, by the way.
What, you're calling me an Ellis Islander? Is that what?
You
What?
called me an Ellis Islander.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I think we could go back through the records and see who was here first. But no, like the reality is, like, you have a great deal of success in assimilating people from fairly different cultures, right? You have, Northern Europeans that it was easier, but Southern Europeans, Irish, not quite as successful. But still, like, they view themselves as Americans first before anything else. So I would call that successful.
There's also a spectrum. I mean, like people
Yeah,
who are closer to the Anglosphere are going to be more able to assimilate. People
yeah,
who are from Thailand or something are not. That's just that this is spectrum. So
yeah.
as you deviate out, Germans and French and Spain, like you get further away from it, and therefore there's people that are more capable of assimilating, that can be assimilated, and the further
Hmm.
out you get, the less and less likely it is. The
Yeah,
idea that we have to treat the Germans the exact same as people from India, I think is ridiculous.
yeah, yeah. Well, exactly. And so at the end of the day, like, it does come down to these realities, that there are, cultural and linguistic and ethnic aspects to all of these things. Like
Mhm,
particularities matter. And that's where, I mean, Stephen kind of dipped his toe in these things in his book, and it got people all hot and bothered.
mhm.
But no one else is even talking about these things, right? No one, dares to discuss, like, the realities of culture and ethnicity and the interplay there,
Mhm.
right? And I think it's foolish, right? You have to be able to say these things. I mean, some of this from, Sabaton, like, this is a good comment. Like, Germans and Scandinavians integrated very well because they're almost Anglo-Protestant even in their home country, and too, like, just even like the culture, like the history of these peoples, right? The Saxons are German, right? Like, Anglo-Saxon culture is is very close and very similar, right?
Mhm.
Same cultural habits and ways of life. The same thing with Northern Europe, Scandinavia, right? And the fact that Northern Germany was Protestant largely, plays a role. I mean, there's a difference between Northern and Southern Germany,
Yeah.
even today. And
Yeah.
so, like, all of that stuff, like, matters. It matters a lot. And so pretending that it doesn't is foolish. And America, culturally, is an Anglo-Protestant country, even if it isn't, ethnically essentially that way,
Mhm.
right? But like you said, there's a
Oh, yeah.
spectrum
Well,
of
so
who adopts those things.
but the institutions were Anglo-Protestant,
Yeah.
right? And the culture reflects the quality and character of the institutions. And so even if we have always had Hispanics and Native Americans and Southern Blacks, integrated into our society, the fact of the matter is that the institutions were Anglo-Protestant. And so
Mhm.
that's what we're talking about. But if you
Yeah.
want to change the institutions, you're going to change America. You're going to
Yeah.
completely transform our way of life. And that's exactly what happened in the
Yeah.
post 1960s as America transformed, and that was like the severance point, and it became old America or heritage America and new America, universalist, imperial, gay imperial America
Yeah.
basically is what it's
Yeah.
become.
Economic zone America, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we are to this day. And so, yeah, but I think, going back to the, previous point of the unprotected class being attacked, being the tax cattle, being this middle that has no representation whatsoever. Um, like just the idea of cultural insurgency and adopting group interests, right?
Yep.
That's part of it. Is like operating at a group level, right?
Right.
Because you like see, I mean, just look at, if you want to talk about politics and identity politics. Oh no, what, like American Jews, for instance, are operating at a group level, right?
Right.
When they lobby the Congress to pass anti-Semitism bills and things like that, they're not doing it as individuals. They're
Right.
doing it as a group, saying this is what is in my group's best interest,
Right.
right? So they think. I don't actually think it is, but that's a story for another day. I
Well,
think it
that's
actually
the
exacerbates
problem.
the problems.
The problem with that is that when you realize the left is operating with group mentality, you realize that there actually are friends and enemies. Like
Yeah,
think about. I mean, I think of Minnesota. Like that's an
yeah,
obvious example with the Somalis and the fact that they stand up and she's acting on behalf of the interests of her people,
yeah.
which that's how I mean, in a way, you can't blame her. You know what I mean? Like that's how I wish Americans did that, right?
I can still blame her, but I know what you mean. Yeah,
No, but
I know what
no,
you mean.
I actually can't blame her like that. Like
Yeah,
if I was in her shoes, I would be fighting for my people. But
yeah,
there's only one group of people that's not allowed to do that, and that's Heritage Americans. They have to think of themselves as individuals only. Everyone else
yeah,
can think of themselves in group terms, but not Heritage Americans because that would be racist.
yeah. And it's funny because like Wolf talks about this in his book, where he's like, this is a key aspect of like Western peoples, right? And particularly, like Anglo-Protestant peoples, is they inherently think of themselves as individuals, and they universalize
Right.
their own experience, their own ways of life upon everyone else, even when they're actively not doing that, right? Even
Yeah.
when they're operating in collective group levels.
And they're not even hiding it.
Yeah, at all, even a little bit.
Yeah.
But they still have this almost pathological need to be able to say, no, we're all individuals. It's all cool. And so it takes a tremendous amount of pain, honestly, to be able to overcome that way of thinking, that way of
Mhm.
life. And that's what's happening right now is, and so in terms of like group level action, it would always be framed as, we're Americans, right? America first. We're going to stand up for the interests of Americans, actual Americans. Like that's the framing it's going to take. I don't think it'll ever be in this racial essentialist, formula.
No, so let me just read like from my article. Like at the end, I just said the most fundamental implication of this is that heritage Americans need to adopt a sort of counter-revolutionary consciousness.
Yeah.
So we need to start thinking of our function in political life as
Mhm.
it's got to be self-consciously directed toward the regime and on
Mhm.
behalf of our friends, people who are like us, people who we identify with. You like
Yeah.
have to think in terms of who you are, because who you are matters more than the propositions that you adhere to. I mean, that's kind of the point of this whole project of being a heritage American, adopting an insurgent mentality, is you have to think of yourselves as part of something greater than yourself, and that's what it's going to take politically to do that.
Yeah.
It's You have to have a counter-revolutionary consciousness, which means you have to
Yeah.
distinguish between friends and enemies. You have to
Yeah.
distinguish between those who are on your side and those who are the other, the
Mhm.
group of people that you are um, defining yourself against.
Yeah. In group and out group.
Liberalism has to die because it's
Yeah.
already died on the left.
Yeah. It's for more than a generation. It's been dead on the left. It's everything is in group and out group at this point. All the people that are like, oh, tribalism, it's so bad. We can't have tribal. It's like, well, yeah, I would like not having tribalism. I would like to just have just individualism across the board. That'd be nice. But you can only have that within the liberal paradigm where everyone is already in the in group and there are no in group out group things.
Exactly.
But we've dispensed with all of that.
Mhm.
It's gone, right? That our hand is being forced, right? No one is coming out and saying, yeah, I wish we could just all organize as under in-group preference and friend enemy distinction. That'd be great, right? In
Right.
like
It's not an
in
ideal, some ideal world that we're building. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, like this is
It's a
this
strategy of self-defense is what it is.
yes, precisely. And so, but that's what you have to do. Like you can't not do. You have to be able to say, all right, we care about Americans. We care about our group, the people in the middle, the 70, 80 million people that voted for Trump in 2020, right? Those are our people, right?
Mhm.
Who are my people, our people. Those people are our people that are being destroyed, that are having their country taken away from them, that are having tens of millions of third world people imported into their country, uh, having all of their industry shipped overseas. All of these things that have happened over the last 2 or 3 generations happening to them, right? They need to be able to say, no, we want what's in our best. And so this really explains the Trump phenomenon more than anything else, how he's able to seize on these things,
Mhm.
because this is what he talked about: immigration, trade, uh, re repatriating industry here in the United States, like all of that kind of stuff is what he campaigned on. And that there's a huge, market, if you want to call it, for that. For
Yeah.
Americans, middle Americans as a group being represented and having their interests as a group
Right.
pursued.
Yeah, and we can't, and that's part of the point too, is we have to reassert ourselves. Like this is what I say in the article too. I said the counter-revolutionary consciousness does not shrink back into the caves, but pursues strategic engagement where all of life is centered around the interests and reinvigorating heritage America. I mean, that's
Yeah.
part of it too, is we have to reassert ourselves. We can't flee. Now's not the time to flee. We're
No.
not at that point yet, and people
There's
need to.
nowhere to flee to anyway.
That's true. Yeah. So I do think we need to mobilize and we need to work together. And people know, for instance, that I'm leaving California, and I'm thinking in terms of, where should I go that is going to help me actually live out this article. And I'm
Mhm.
obviously, I'll announce that where I'm going in a few months, but I'm taking this very seriously because I do want to be part of this reinvigoration. I do want to
Yeah.
reassert myself and live with a group mentality of those that are like me and have a similar like-minded appreciation for our heritage. And we want to, reassert and counter the disgusting regime. And that's part of the
Yeah.
ethos of how we ought to live our lives. And I'm practicing what I preach here.
Yeah. And so if you are American and you love America, regardless of whatever your ethnic background is, I mean that's part of it too. It's like, and it sounds like we're being egalitarians or things like that. No, we're not, or like racial or ethnic egalitarians. It's that there are people like I think of like have you ever met Arthur Quan Lee?
Mm-mm.
Oh, he's in Southern
Oh,
California, way away from you.
is he on Twitter or what?
Yeah, yeah, he's the jacked Korean guy.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, I'll have him be my neighbor. I don't care. Oh, he's not white. It's like I don't care. He's
No,
an American. He
but
loves
there is,
America.
yeah, but there is something about this shared memory that you can't replicate with foreign transplants. Like even if you
Yeah,
are a right wing and based,
yeah,
like some of those guys are, I appreciate and I want to salvage the ethos and aesthetics of Middle America. I really do.
yeah, 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 absolutely. And so
Like
sounds very waspy.
yeah, we're not gonna get yeah, we'll show this. I'm not gonna get jacked Korean guy to appreciate old Ford trucks and barns. I'm just not, you know.
you never know.
So,
You, ne- you never know, man.
yeah.
But you know what I'm saying though is like at the end of the day, right? America is what it is, and there are people from all different places that assimilate into American culture and don't have the deeper 5 generations now. Maybe they will,
Yeah.
right? That's part of it, and I want to be around people that love America, right? That love our country, love all of it and our history,
Hmm.
and in one sense, like I'd rather have them than the insane white liberals around me that hate us, right? That hate whiteness even. And so, yeah, that's, I don't care if he drives a Ford. That's a good, yeah. CJ and I are Ford respecters. That's one
Yeah,
thing we share is,
I'm an anti Tesla. So
yeah, I mean, even though Ford is very much part of the GAE now, and it's horrible,
oh yeah,
but
yeah.
but there's something to be said about things. I mean, you want to talk quintessentially American, like Henry Ford. You did that for American or Western History Month, right? You did a one on Henry
Oh
Ford.
no, I didn't do Henry
All right,
Ford.
next year. There's
But I
still
do
time.
have a Confederate license plate frame on my Ford. I have an old 1980 Ford. It's really
Well,
fun to drive it to like Whole Foods, and like park next to the Tesla ladies.
well, yeah, because Northern California was like Confederate, wasn't it? Like parts of it.
Well, Southern California too, but like,
Yeah.
it's funny. It's just like, well, the thing about Northern California, like the gold rush guys, is a lot of them were basically just running from the law wherever they
Yeah.
were.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so there's a deep ethos of renegade, spirit over here. So
Yeah, I mean that's you to a T, I think. But we should, what as we're closing out here, discuss our episode on Monday that we're going to have. Do you want to
yeah.
introduce our special? This is the,
Oh yeah, yeah. So
our monthly premium subscriber episode.
it's going to be very premium. Um, but
Very premium.
we're gonna have we were gonna have Paul Gottfried on, but we had to move him to the next month. But we're gonna have Steve Saylor on, and we're going to get into his noticing book. And there's a couple select essays I think that we'll probably get deeper into. And Andrew's going to talk to him about sports while I take a nap, and we'll take questions from the audience as well.
Yeah, and the last time we did it, the chat didn't work because it was an unlisted episode. And
Right.
so if you are subscribed to contramundumpodcast.com, just send us a message on there about anything you want to ask Steve, and we'll get to those questions that way. And you can even send it in real time while the episode's going, and we can ask those questions if you're watching live. But yeah, very excited to have him on. He's, if you don't know Steve Saylor by now on Twitter,
He's the
just the
noticer in
memes.
chief. He's the
Right.
noticer in chief. And
Yeah.
you have to go to contramundumpodcast.com though, or otherwise you won't get notified. You won't be allowed in.
Yeah.
You
So
have to
so go on there and subscribe. That's the feature for, we want to reward the people that have been very generous in supporting the show. And so that is how we're going to do it, is special guests like that have a lot of interesting stuff to say, that are really, really, really interesting and cool. And we'll have as soon as we have that episode out, we will release the Martyr Made one from last month. So everyone will get to see that. And so we'll keep churning out the content. We're slaving away in the content mines here at Contramundum, and happy to provide as much as we can. But anything else? Any other articles that you want to
So
shill?
no, just go to American Reformer and look for that one. I'm going to do a follow-up piece on the new Jacksonianism, which will be much more practical as well. So
Yeah, yeah, that'll be great. Have they haven't written anything on Nixon, have they?
who's they? Oh, American Reformer?
American Reformer. I don't think there's anything on.
No.
Well,
My
maybe.
conversation with Jeff last week was pretty interesting though.
Yeah. Speaking of Nixon, like I've become. I mean, I've always been a Nixon fan, and much more so in the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Just fascinating figure in the middle of the 20th century.
Well, I see that's the California that like. I like
Yeah.
there's a strong element of California that has some based aspects to it. So Nixon is one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. He is, and I mean, it just it's so much like Trump. I
Mhm.
mean, I even see, like, sometimes people are like, "Oh, every picture of Trump is like pure Kino, right? Just whatever he takes a picture, it's always just iconic." And the same goes with Nixon, right? Every photograph of him everywhere, it's like, wow, that's awesome. And so I mean, just similarities like that, and the fact that the deep state sought to destroy him as well, and that's what your episode was on,
Can we answer this
was
real
Martin
quick?
Man. Oh, who
I
would you
say
say?
Obama. Probably Obama.
Worst president of our lifetime. Yeah, I would agree. Obama
And
for
then
sure.
Bush 2 next.
Yeah, because I mean everything with Biden is just. I mean, he's Obama's third term. I mean, the guy's not running anything. Everybody knows he's not running it. His whole White House is just retreads from the Obama administration, and so anyone would be tempted to say Biden. Um, I think you got to start with Obama first. I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
especially the reinvigoration of the radical left, and especially the racialist radical left in his term, Obergefell, all of those. I mean, just rapid cultural destruction that occurred under Obama is. I mean, it's incontrovertible. Definitely him. But who
Anyways,
would you
yeah,
say is second worst? You say
I say
W?
Bush 2.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think so. We should do a stream on all the presidents. That would be a great episode.
that's a
Um,
good one for Paul. Actually, Paul's really good on
yeah,
that issue.
yeah, we'll have to have him on just for that alone. I mean, that would be a 3 hour stream probably, and it'd be worth every second. So anyway, we'll instead of continuing on with on air production meetings, we will
Yeah, I gotta
we'll let
go.
CJ get going here. But thank you again, everyone who joined us in the chat, everyone who watched. If you haven't subscribed here on YouTube, please go ahead and do that and click like, smash the like button. That's the streamer saying that we got to say. Smash the like button and the subscribe button and share it with your friends. These kind of discussions, because really, you're not going to get these conversations anywhere else. So thank you all for joining us. Until Monday, for all of the paid subscribers who we love the most, who are all beautiful, healthy, jacked, strong people. Uh, until Monday or Friday, we will see you next time.